Hey guys, in the run-up to the launch of my film, you're going to see me animate this shot right here. And we'll start at not the beginning because I probably forgot to record the start bit, but we'll start here. And this is going to be a long one, so settle in. I've got some creativity quotes to share with you today that I think really motivate and inspire me, give me guidance on my path as a creative. And as well as that, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the process of making this shot. This was a pretty epic shot and I'm quite proud of how it turned out. It was a bit of a challenge because it's a very slow shot. It's an important one for the film because it's where our two main characters are meeting for the first time. Hopefully it's not too much of a spoiler for me to say that he meets this entity who presents herself in the form of someone that he would be familiar with. This idea has been done in science fiction before, and I thought I would apply it here, where an apparition or an entity that we can't understand easily will choose to take the form of someone that we can understand and relate to. This is done with aliens and things like that, but in this, she really represents and embodies the ocean. And he's obviously very surprised to see what appears to be a person under the waves and not needing to breathe air. And so this is like a slowed down moment of him experiencing this encounter for the first time. And because it's slow, it unfolds very slowly, that does present some challenges. So you just saw me animate the hair into a loop. So it's waving passively in these ocean currents very slowly. But I wanted to loop that and then in compositing, just very slowly, gently move these limbs and his head just very gradually so that he's coming to a stop at a suspended point in the water face to face. So I'm going to be redrawing some of the parts of the body, making sure that that hair loops very majestically because this is quite a surreal moment and we want things like the hair and the clothing to represent that. So now these rippling currents moving throughout that add to that surreal nature. So while you see that play out, I'm going to read to you the first quote on creativity to live by. And this is quite a long one. Here we go. We are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affairs of men does not remain at flood, it ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is adamant to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, "Too late." And this is a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. in 1967. And I really like this. Obviously, he was talking about his own struggles and he was someone who created things. I do see Martin Luther King Jr. as a creator because he wrote some of the best speeches in human history. Okay, so creativity can take many forms and creativity is important. If he had not chosen to be creative in his speech writing, the world would look very differently today. And he's someone who, in this quote, reflected on procrastination. And I think procrastination is something that many of us creatives deal with. And it's interesting to me to think that someone as famous and well-known and celebrated as King had his own battles with procrastination because we often see him as a superhuman person. But no, at one point, he had to sit down at the typewriter and channel his focus into being creative. And he did not live an easy life. It was probably even harder than a lot of us in the challenges that he faced to focus his mind on that creativity. I really like this quote. Time is very finite, and there is this idea of being too late. And I looked through my notes at some of the videos I've wanted to make. I've realized that I'm too late to make them because they were on a topic that's now irrelevant. I keep this quote in mind nowadays, and I think about, I don't want to be too late. I must act with a certain urgency on my ideas. So very important quote, I find, on creativity. So checking in with the animation process now, you can see that I'm doing the hair in front of the head. I had drawn the cranium as an approximation, and that I find helps me with drawing the hair and animating the hair, making sure that the hair is conforming to the roundness of the cranium. So it's interacting with things like the ear, and also I have to try and keep the hair out of the way of the eyes because I want the audience to be able to see his eyes, because that's where a lot of the performance is, in his expression, and I think that's important to check in with the character's expression in shots like this to have that resonance of emotion. Animating that foreground hair, because I've got the silhouette going on behind that you can see outlined as purple, and now I'm just having those clumps of hair kind of waving back and forth, and it all has to loop because this shot is sustained for a long period of time. But let's skip a little way forward because we don't have all day. I will read you the next quote. Around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Walt Disney Company. I wanted to bring this quote up, firstly because I genuinely like the quote, but also I think this quote shows how the Walt Disney Company has changed over time. That is not what they're about nowadays. And I feel like that really shows in their movies, and it's one of the things to blame for the stagnation of the movie industry. Although I don't want to dwell on that right now, I do want to use that as a point of comparison because there was a time where Disney was picking up every Oscar every year, and I think it was because of this curiosity and this creativity and this pursuit of making films for the sake of making films. We can take that wisdom from Disney and apply it in our own work and our own pursuits. Checking in with the animation process now, I'm pretty happy with the way that is looping, so now I'm going to move on to the other character, the siren, and at this point in the process I only have 2 drawings from the storyboard, and I like to adapt the drawings straight into animation keyframes. That's just how I like to do it, to retain some of the energy and the intentionality of my original drawings. So I'm jumping straight in, adapting that, and the first thing I'm doing here is drawing the cranium, a bit like what I did with the other character. I wanted the character to take on a kind of fish-like look, and I looked at the designs of fish like tuna. They have this kind of sharp, sleek look to the nose and whatnot, and she actually looks different from different angles. I'm not too conscious, I'm not too careful about the differences in the different angles of the face and how consistent the character is drawn, but here especially I wanted her to have that fish-like look to her side profile. Now before this, in the previous shot, she was wrapped in all of this drapery to the point where she looked like a mummified thing, like an unidentifiable object, and here we see that drapery falling away from her as she kind of reveals her form, the form she's decided to take on to this character. For her performance, I was very mindful of the performance of these wild animals that will occasionally approach humans in order to ask for help from these humans. So sometimes you'll see a sea turtle or perhaps a deer on land who will come up to a random stranger, a random person, and show them the wire that's tangled around their leg or something. And you can see that they're afraid, but they understand as well that they have to ask for help out of desperation. So I was thinking about that, this expression to kind of hesitantly implore someone for their help. And at the same time, without too many spoilers, there's a bit of intentional misdirection to this gesture. I want it to be ambiguous. I want it to be able to lead people down the wrong path, because there's a surprise later in the film with what the creature wants from this character. Okay, I think it's time for another quote. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique, and if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium and will be lost. And this is a quote by Martha Graham, very famous dancer and dance instructor. I always like to use these videos as an opportunity to remind people out there that what they have is unique, is a unique gift, and it can only come from you. There's a certain quality to the artwork that you can create that is different from your peers. It's different from everyone who's came before you and everyone who will come after you. And like the other quote, it suggests that there's some urgency to document it now while you can. And if you document it now in the way that you can with what you have, its imperfection rather than being a problem for the artwork, those imperfections are what make it special. Well, checking back at the animation, it looks like I haven't made much progress, but I think that's because this is a very subtle, slow, precise shot that I'm trying to pull off. So it's taking a lot of patience from me. The recording you're seeing is playing at 10 times the speed that I actually made it at. So it's 1,000% speed. Yeah, getting this shot right took a lot of work. So I'm gonna cut ahead a little bit here. You can see here I'm using a simplified version of the figure and just moving it very gently into place. I'm also adding a blink on the movement where she inches her way forwards to get closer to him, to kind of see him, inspect him, try and see what kind of person he is. And because it's very subtle movement, I'm doing a lot of these redrawings and tracings over, moving things very, very carefully, very precisely into place to just get that subtlety that this shot needs. Also rotating the canvas all the time, because it's kind of weird to animate everything at a 90-degree angle, and it's a bit easier if I just change the angle so that they're face to face in the normal way. Okay, on to the next quote. If you find yourself asking, am I really an artist? Chances are you are. The counterfeit innovator is wildly self-confident. The real one is scared to death. And this is a quote by Steven Pressfield. I feel like I could have chosen a lot of different quotes from Steven Pressfield, and in this quote in particular, he does something special. He actually flips this idea about imposter syndrome, and he's saying that that is actually a sign that you are an artist. And he also kind of hints at the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is this false confidence that complete beginners experience when they first get into art and they think they're the bee's knees, even when they haven't spent a lot of time actually making a lot of art. So the fact that you might have lost confidence in your abilities is actually, ironically, a sign that you're getting better, or even that you've made it. Okay, well, with the animation I forged ahead with the body and the head and the face, and now I'm adding some of the hair. And of course, this is the part that I always look forward to, is the long, majestic hair that's unfolding from her head. It's been wrapped around her body, and it's kind of like this sea spirit has figured out what a human looks like and has just unwrapped the outer layers, the outer defenses, and the hair being much of that outer layer. And now it's just kind of falling away from her, but it's doing it so very slowly. And for the hair here, I was really inspired by stingrays and flatfish and the way that their bodies can kind of shimmer as flat surfaces. And you can kind of see the shapes here. I've also put in some wave shapes in certain parts, and those waves are going to roll down. They're going to roll their way down, and it's going to look hopefully very satisfying by the end. And while you watch that, I have a banger quote for you on creativity. Here we go. Here's the next quote. The truly creative mind in any field is no more than this: a human creature born abnormally, inhumanly sensitive. To him, a touch is a blow, a sound is a noise, a misfortune is a tragedy, a joy is an ecstasy, a friend is a lover is a god, and failure is death. Add to this cruelly delicate organism the overpowering necessity to create. And this is a quote by Pearl S. Buck, very famous writer of the 1930s. And I like this quote despite the fact that it's kind of a complaint. It's like, gosh, why do artists have to be so sensitive? But at the same time, it's also defining an artist. Sensibility is one where they notice the small things as well as the large things. They pick up on it and they feel it. They don't just notice it, they feel the small subtleties of life. That, in a way, could be a curse, but it could also be a gift. And of course, this was written with writers in mind, I feel, but it can also apply to animators. We have to open up in order to let the world in, and only then can we really capture something authentic. This next quote is pretty short. He that is taught only by himself has a fool for a master. By Hunter S. Thompson, one of my favorite writers. I love his writing style, it's very entertaining. And I don't want this one to disparage self-taught artists. I think you can be taught by someone without ever meeting them, without ever coming across them in real life. You can watch a YouTube video from someone, you can take someone's online course. You could even just see one of their artworks in a work in progress stage, and that in itself reveals so much about the process. And that is teaching. The artifacts of their work are teaching you. You could even watch a behind the scenes of a film or something, listen to an interview of a famous artist or director or something, and they're your teacher. But I suppose the important thing is to have the humility to allow yourself to be taught by someone who is experienced in a way that you're not. And you can gather so many experiences from many people who have different life experiences to you, and that's certainly what I try to do. I'm always trying to learn from new people and gather as many teachers as possible. I'm going to put back to back two different quotes, two different ideas about thinking, and hopefully their contradictions will spark some debate. So the following is a quote. My process is thinking about my stories for a long time. I love that quote, and that's by Hayao Miyazaki. Needs no introduction, really. But yeah, you can really see in the behind the scenes of his process that he does indeed think intensely about every moment in his film. And these films are the act of a lot of deliberating, a lot of pacing back and forth, scratching the head. And, well, in his case, that thinking really pays off. But there are some quotes here that has a different idea about thinking. So this quote goes, "Don't think about making art, just get it done. Let everyone else decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it. While they are deciding, make even more art." And that's a quote by Andy Warhol. And while I'm not the biggest fan of Andy Warhol's art, I do like this quote, and I do find this quote very nice. It's basically saying to ignore the haters, which I think is a good strategy. But I suppose when he's saying don't think about making art, he's saying don't plan to make art, and don't stop making art so that you have to think about it, so that you have to schedule it into your day. But instead, just be in a routine of just continually making art, and don't worry so much about how it's received. That's what a good artist will do, I guess. Checking in now with the hair animation, and you can see that there's a crest on the top that's kind of rolling off the top of her head, and this part I'm really excited about because right now that little crest is in the shape of a wave in a way, and I'm going to do something pretty special with that in the upcoming parts where it kind of turns into like a twisting vortex, and it's really nice and fun to be able to work things in like that through a lot of finessing. Obviously it takes a lot of time, but the results can be very, very satisfying. I do find that while the body kind of needs to be rigid in many ways to retain a performance, the hair doesn't have a solid structure to it, so it's a very nice vehicle for some more abstract shapes and experimentation and just going wild and exploring. Here she makes a movement forwards and the hair is left in place. But yeah, this hair is taking me forever, so I am skipping through the stages of this because it's too long for this video, even at 10 times speed. Another short and sweet quote: "The worst enemy to creativity is self-doubt." That was said by Sylvia Plath, and I love that. Short and sweet. So the best friend of creativity is self-confidence, I suppose, if we take that quote and do the opposite. So I wonder, how can we build self-confidence? I think that's probably opening it up to a much wider topic that needs its own video. But perhaps we can start by identifying how much this self-doubt problem is governing what we do creatively. And once we become aware of where we're getting blocked by self-doubt, that might be the first step to solving it. What kind of creative pursuits have you not even attempted because you don't believe that you would be able to do it, because you don't believe in yourself? Reconsider if it's worth at least giving it an attempt. Like, what is really the worst that can happen? You're going to create something and it might not be the best, but it will be something. You might end up surprising yourself with how well you do. Okay, checking in with the animation. I've skipped ahead a lot in the hair animation because it's such a long recording. It took me so many hours to make this. But now we've jumped forward in time to where I'm working on the dress. And similarly to the hair, the dress is unfurling, but I'm trying to give it some interesting stylistic traits, giving it these galactic swirls. I was quite inspired by the surface of planets like Saturn and Jupiter, the storms that appear and twist around on the surface of those planets. You can see from the light box and the impressions of the previous frames that the spacing is very, very packed together, which suggests that it's moving very slowly. And slow, graceful, deliberate animation like this takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. And because I'm wanting to improvise with it, it means I'm going straight ahead as well. So this is a combination of things that just require a steady hand and a lot of diligence, persistently drawing those lines and controlling them carefully to get it just right. Now adding these extra parts on that are coming away like loose bits of rope or string. My idea here is that it doesn't have to follow a conventional dress because this sea entity isn't very familiar with humans, so it's making an impression or an idea of what a human looks like, but without the full knowledge or without adhering to actual measurements, or at least that's my my thought for how to justify it going a little bit wild here. Skipping ahead a little bit to drawing the armbands and wristbands on, and now we're going to show a little bit of the coloring process. Okay, I think it's time for the last quote of this video, and I'm ending with a banger. It's one of my all-time favorites. Here we go. "All I insist on, and nothing else, is that you should show the whole world that you are not afraid. Be silent if you choose, but when it is necessary, speak, and speak in such a way that people will remember it." And that is a quote by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Imagine if Mozart didn't have the courage to write music or to release the music and perform that music. Imagine what a tragedy that would have been. It's a blessing to us all that he had the courage, or that he found the courage within him to show the world what he had. But the message I also take away from this is that if you're going to make a film or you're going to make a piece of art, why not make it about something that is really important to you, that you care about, that you think is something that people need to hear? I'm making this video right now, while it's not exactly art, I'm making this video because it's something I think some people out there might need to hear. I mean, they might want to hear it, sure, but some people might need to hear these quotes because it can change like a switch in them and make them see things differently. But yeah, I think what he's saying is make it count. Make it count. And I hope that you, listening to this, follow in his same path and find the courage to speak. Speak through your artwork. Thanks very much for watching and listening. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit the like button, leave a comment for me, and consider subscribing. And I'll see you in another video. Goodbye.